Welcome everybody, good evening. Welcome to the new school. My name is Fabio Parasecoli, and I'm the Director of Food Studies Initiatives here at the new school. I just want to say a few words about our program, and then I'll introduce our guest, and we'll get into this evening's discussion. So the program at the new school, the Food Studies program, started around 2008. And now it has developed into a full major and minor. We have a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science. And starting from the fall of 2015, we'll also have an associate degree. And we hope that will be interesting for people who want to change careers, or maybe for food professionals, chefs, that maybe have already part of their education. We're also thinking about developing some graduate certificates and other activities for graduate students, since the topic of food is becoming particularly interesting also for them. The classes, the undergraduate classes, at least most of them, are also open to the public. So if you're interested in taking any class, you can sign up. We're very happy to have continuing education students. This is also part of what we've been doing for so many years as part of the tradition of the new school. The connection with the community and with the public is also maintained through these events. We're very happy to have a healthy program. On April 10th and 11th, we will have a 2-day conference called Gotham on a Plate. It will be on food in New York City, and the website is online. You can just check, the new school, Gotham on a Plate. And then in November, from the 5th through the 7th of November, we're going to have the second International Food Design Conference. And that website is fooddesign2015.com. Last but not least, we have a website called The Inquisitive Eater, and we invite everybody to submit their work. We are interested in fiction, non-fiction, poetry, photography, art, video, any sort of expression around food. And of course, we have a collection of videos. Probably you'll be seeing this video online. And we also have a section called the Think Tank for people who are interested in longer projects, maybe research. We're also happy to publish that. So now I want to introduce tonight's guest. It's Professor Amy Bentley. She teaches at the Department of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health at New York University. She teaches history. She's a historian, and actually we were reminiscing. We've known each other for a while. Her first book came out in '98, and it was Eating for Victory, Food Rationing and the Politics of Domesticity. It was one of the first full-on food studies books in the late 90s. I must say it's one of the first food studies books I read, and it had a great influence on my research. We worked together for many things, including the Association for the Study of Food and Society. She's now the editor of the association's journal, that is Food, Culture, and Society. And she was also the editor for the 6-volume, the contemporary age volume of a 6-volume cultural history of food, for which I was the general editor. So this is Inventing Baby Food. It's her new book. And I would invite Amy to come. She will give us a short presentation about the content of the book, and then we'll have a conversation, and then we will open also to questions from the public. Thank you. Amy?
Thank you, Fabio. Thanks so much for inviting me to here, and all of you for coming. I really appreciate it. I'll just take you through slides that are kind of an overview of my book. This is the cover. The book has really 3 main arguments. First is this idea that it's an invented product. It has many positives, especially in U.S. history, most prominently this idea of convenience and flexibility. And it really allows, say, women to move away from the kitchen, to be more mobile, and to even move into the paid workforce because of this product that's convenient. So it has many positives, but it also, if you look through the history of it, it has some negatives as well. As we'll see, one of its function is that it displaces breastfeeding. We know a lot about the story of the switch from bottle feeding to breastfeeding, but one of the things that we don't know that I tried to examine was as baby food was introduced at earlier and earlier ages, it also displaces breastfeeding. And then also it does what I'm calling, primes what I'm calling the industrial palate. This early acquisition of food that was so full of salt, sugar, preservatives, additives, acclimates Americans at a very, very early age to these tastes of highly industrially processed foods. So I look forward to talking about that with you further. And then another theme in the book is that no matter how the advice and the practice changes, and it does change wildly over the 20th century, what stays constant is this anxiety that women have about feeding their child. And it's a big responsibility, and there are all sorts of messages and pressures telling them how to do that. It's also complicated by this role of the mother consumer, and that's because when baby food got going in the early 20th century, that was just when industrialization was really taking off, and you had a proliferation of products, you had a workforce, a population that could afford them, and so the purchasing of goods gets conflated with nurturing. So part of a mother's job is to purchase the right things for her baby, and those things are emblematic of her love. And so you get this interconnection between buying things and love. Just a quick snapshot of shifting advice and practice. And I think I'm actually going to move to this. It's a little more visually arresting. You can see the average age of introducing solids just kind of plummet from the 1880s to the 1950s and 60s. And that's because it was just kind of this perfect storm of elements. You had, that's just kind of giving you these points. It goes back up, and then it settles somewhere around 4 to 6 months, and that's kind of where we are today. That's where researchers think is the optimal age for introducing solids, that a baby's digestive system is equipped to digest solid food, and the head is strong enough so that the head can turn away if the baby doesn't want any more food, so you don't overfeed the child, and can sit up. And so for those reasons, it's seen as the optimal age of introducing solids. There's some other reasons too. But it drops so dramatically, especially between the 1920s and the 1950s and 60s, for a few reasons. So in the early 20th century, you had the discovery and promotion of vitamins. Until then, it was not really thought that fruits and vegetables had any important food value. People knew that meat was important, people knew grain was important, but vegetables were seen as nice but not necessary, and even a little suspect for some interesting reasons. It was thought the laxative effect would be harmful, or it could cause, it was not quite clear where dysentery was coming from, and so fruits and vegetables were seen as not important. But of course, when vitamins are discovered, then they become important. You get this industrialization of the food supply and advertising that comes right at this moment, too, in the early 20th century. And then the medicalization of infancy and childhood. And so you get specialization, pediatricians, OBGYNs, and all of them are kind of staking their claim in aspects of birth and infancy. And child feeding is one of those areas where they stake their claim. And then there wasn't a lot of evidence that early feeding was harmful. And so really until the 1970s, it was not clear, is it okay to feed your baby 24 hours after birth? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't help, but maybe it doesn't hurt either. And so there was all sorts of unclear, there was not knowledge. There was not any science that was done on that. And then you have the society, the post-war society, the cultural climate of the 1950s and 60s, which I think we'll talk about later. This is, I'm just going to show you some pictures. This is an early advertisement for patent formula, which is powdered formula. It was a forerunner of the formula that we have today. And you can't really read the nursery rhyme, but it's, there was an old woman that lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she knew not what to do. Some she had nursed and some bottle fed, but those raised on Nestle's food came out far ahead. I think that's my phone, sorry. So clearly advertisers from the 1880s are doing what they're supposed to do, which is persuade people that their products are not just nice but necessary and even optimal if you want your child to be the strongest and smartest. Gerber baby food was one of the earliest commercial solid baby food makers, and it's always been the dominant brand. It's always led market share dramatically. This is an ad in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1931, so very soon after it was it got going, and it's offering doctors to free products. So if you send your name in, we will send you some free products. You'll get to know our products, and you can tell your patients about them. What advertisers also do is try to expand the time that infants would be ingesting their products and parents would be buying them. So this is an ad for Libby's baby food, and the copy reads, "Tiny babies love the vegetables that Libby prepares so carefully for them." As early as 3 months, usually fed as early as 3 months. And so then this baby is very, very young looking. And they're giving the message, both verbally and visually, that you can feed your baby early, in 3 months in this case. And that will be a really good thing for your baby. Baby food proliferates. It's rapidly popular. Women in the 30s, even during the Depression, find this product really convenient and really important, and production keeps moving and moving until by the 1940s, 50s, you get the landscape of grocery stores changing. Whole aisles and departments develop with products, rows and rows and rows of products. And in 1948, baby food was the most commonly purchased canned item in 10 major American cities. So you can see the rapid proliferation, and it just becomes a part of the American landscape of food and this natural rite of passage for American infants. Just a couple of other advertisements. The spoon becomes a really important marker of civilization, of feeding your child with a spoon, and it's bound up in ideas of American wealth and science and technology and power. I don't want to talk, I'm going to not talk about this because I want to get into have more of a conversation. But one of the things that this does is this creates an early acclimation to this canned baby food taste, or what happens when you can food. It changes the taste of it radically. It just has to, by nature of the canning process and the things you have to add to it. And this is happening in baby food, and it's not seen as there's anything wrong with it. That's just what happens to canned baby food, and the manufacturers and the public don't think anything of it until later. But that early acclimation is creating further desires for canned foods, for highly high preservatives, food with a lot of salt and sugar. And just to give you an example, these are labels from Beechnut baby food, I think the early 1960s. And so another way that baby food makers increase their market share is to create more products. So not just carrots, but carrots in butter sauce. And they are listing the ingredients on the label very matter-of-factly. And you can see the ingredients are carrots, light brown sugar, butter, salt, and sufficient water for preparation. So of the 4 or 5 ingredients. One is carrots, and the rest are things that we might not think would be great to put into baby food and feed babies at 4 to 6 weeks after birth. But yet, that's what's happening, and that's just the way that the food supply is going. This is just a picture that was in Life magazine in the 1960s of twins being fed baby food desserts. And if you make it into Life magazine, you've made it into mainstream America. In the 70s, then becomes a period of questioning the status quo. So you're getting a rise of questioning society in general, institutions, science, authority, and this is making its way into the food supply, of course. And studies are beginning to be developed that are questioning the use of salt and sugar in the diet in general and also in baby foods diets. This is a picture from a white paper that the Center for Science and the Public Interest published in the 1970s that was one of the first to alert the public to the fact that there were things in baby food that probably shouldn't be there. And this is illustrating the fact that babies were consuming, or there was available in the food supply, 72 dozen jars of baby food per infant from birth to 12 months. So a lot of baby food. This is some things on taste that I'm going to kind of skip through. And basically, the marketers did analyses of taste in baby food and tried to figure out what should baby food taste like. And of course, they interview the mothers because the baby food maker babies can't really talk. and this is what they come up with, this profile. So the mother's taste is important, but sweet and seasoned are the most important values. And seasoned means with salt, not too much, but salt. It shouldn't be bland. And these other flavors profiles are either neutral or negative. And so the baby food makers knew that they should be producing food that was sweet or seasoned or salty. There's other characteristics that they don't like as well. They don't like lumpy baby food, watery baby food. Smooth is important. Consistency is important. They don't want pale colors. They want vibrant colors. They don't like certain smells. And so all of that just points to the need to create baby food that is has artificial colors, has salt or sugar, that basically the way that commercial baby food came out, and especially Gerber baby food. And you can see the statistics by the 1960s, 90% of infants are being fed baby food, and most of it is Gerber baby food. Why is this important? Well, jumping ahead, this is a snapshot of what Americans are eating according to the 2010 dietary guidelines. The line is what we should be eating, the amount of fruits and vegetables, dairy, solid fats, and added sugars. And then the bars are actually what we're eating. And you can see on the top, we're not eating enough of the good stuff, and we're eating a lot of the bad stuff, solid fats and added sugars. And then this is from a really cool website by National Geographic, infographic called What the World Eats. And it has these graphs for major countries, and it breaks down fats and sugars, grains, vegetables, produce. And the United States, 37% of its calories consumed are fats and sugars, which is the highest in the world. So we are very, very top-heavy on these highly industrialized processes. And most of these fats and sugars are coming from highly industrialized products that are minimally nutritious and have a lot of sugar, fat, and salt. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is make this connection between this early acclimation of preference for these flavors and then just the proliferation of these products in our food supply and our kind of pathway. You could even almost see it as like a gateway drug, a great gateway food to the Snickers and the chips and soda that comes later. Just quickly, in the 1970s, they start reevaluating it, and you get a backlash. You get the return, a questioning of the status quo. You get a development of a DIY movement in the 1970s, where women are deciding that the food is not nutritious enough, healthy enough, it's too expensive, and they start making their own. This is quite alarming to the baby food makers, and they have some dirty tricks that they play, but they eventually acquiesce and they start taking out the sugar and the salt and move to organics. And also the age at which one feeds baby food begins to move back to that 4 to 6 month mark that we looked at before. So where are we now? We are in what some people have called baby food 2.0. The rise of the pouch has been a game changer, and it's a further continuation of this idea of convenience. Where jars are convenient, pouches are even that more convenient. So it's really a product, again, that fits right into American culture and ideas about efficiency and convenience. And baby food makers love it because they extend the use of baby food by about a year. So before, when baby food products were used from about age 4 months to about 9, 10, 11, if people lasted that long, now these pouches allow toddlers, parents to buy them for toddlers to about age 2. And so you just hand your kid a pouch, and the kid can just kind of squeeze it and eat it while you're walking in your stroller to the next event. There's some it's like the story of baby food is a story of trade-offs. There's pros and cons. When what we get in convenience, we may give up in other things. And the products are, especially from these new upstart boutique companies, are much more healthy, and they are made with ingredients that people in the good food movement would be interested in, kale and quinoa. But if you look on the back, they still have a very sweet flavor profile because that's an easy flavor to appeal to babies and mothers. And so the first ingredient's like pear concentrate usually, or apple concentrate. So it's an interesting story, and there's a lot of, I think, repercussions that we can talk about. And thank you. So we'll move to the discussion.
How did you come into this project? Your previous project was about Victory Gardens, and now it's baby food. And also, what was your personal connection with the theme, since you have 3 children?
I got interested in the project because I had a baby who is now 20. And at that moment when I went to go, buy baby food or look at the baby food, I saw all of these products on the shelf, and it was so interesting to me. And I would look at the ingredients of the baby applesauce, and it had apples and water and citric acid. And then I went over to the regular canned food shelf, and I grabbed a jar of applesauce, and it had apples, water, and citric acid. And the only difference was this cute little baby on the baby food, and it was also like about 3 or 4 times more expensive. So I thought, this is really interesting. This is a constructed category of food, and what did people feed their children before this category developed? And it just made me interested in it. And because I was a food historian, I thought, wow, well, I can do this for my job, and I can kind of research the story. So it started about 20 years ago, and I've been working on it steadily since.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. And I did, reading both your first and this book, I think there are connections, because after all, one of the main protagonists in both books are women.
Yeah.
So how women actually are in charge somehow of bringing, cultural, social values into the families, and political and economic structures. I don't know if you want to comment on that. I think it's a very interesting, similarity between the 2 cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Apparently everybody has a book inside them, and my first book was, as I look back, I realized it was about my mother. My mother was not of the World War II era, but it was about women who had to put food on the table for their families, and how they did it during a period of rationing and restricted food supply was kind of something that I was looking at and sort of subconsciously write about my mother, who was my mother and made me good food all my whole life. And this book is about me, I'm sure. I looked at it as both an interested participant and also a researcher, and kind of went back and forth between those two views, a subjective and a more objective, and tried to have an objective point of view. I didn't want this to be a diatribe about the baby food industry, but yet it's so central. Feeding babies is so central to women's roles as nurturer. Now that I've written the book, obviously men can feed babies, right? Men do it all the time. There are two-parent male families who are raising children and feeding babies. But the literature is so directed, and has been for so long, to women and about women, and it's been so entwined in women's roles until just so recently that it ends up being a book about women and feeding children.
The idea that you introduce of the mother consumer, it's very interesting. And briefly in your presentation, we saw a slide on Ernest Dichter. Can you explain more this concept of the mother consumer? How is it an American, institution of American history?
Yeah. Well, Ernest Dichter, which I didn't get to talk about, is seen as, you could call him the original Mad Men, I think. He's seen as the father of the focus group, and he was trained in Vienna, I believe, under Freud as a psychoanalyst, and fled from Vienna to the United States in the 1930s, and was one of the first to think about creating an emotional appeal for products in advertising. And the advertising really switched in the 50s and 60s. It went from being, here are the facts that are going to persuade you to buy our product, to, we're going to evoke a feeling. We're going to tap into your inner desires and your inner insecurities to create a desire to produce our product. And so they do that. They're doing this not with just baby food, with cars and cigarettes and clothing, but they do this brilliantly with advertising. And they're creating this role of the nurturer and an ideal picture of a woman nurturing her baby, and the baby food is playing a major role in that. And so this idea of the mother consumer, if being a good mother means in part being a good consumer, then a mother would have to question her abilities if she's really going to go against all of those media messages that are saying, to be a good mother, you should feed your baby our baby food, and you should do it this way at this age. And so it really takes a lot to resist those messages in a particularly vulnerable time, I think.
The transition, I think, from the mother that makes the food to the mother that buys the food to the mother that critiques in a way the food is very interesting. At a certain point in your book, you discuss a Senate committee hearing where actually there was sort of a process to the industry. Can you tell us more about that? I think that's a very interesting moment in the early 70s when people start having doubts about what's in these products. Are they good? Are they bad?
Right. Well, there's a few things going on. So, as I mentioned, there's scientific studies begin in the late 60s and early 70s that all of a sudden point to potential harmful effects of a lot of salt and sugar, and then also feeding infants at these early ages. Before, it was not. Doctors wondered about it, but that was such the trend, and they just felt like, well, we don't really have any evidence that it's not good. And so this scientific evidence begins to emerge. At the same time, you have a shift from what people call the scientific motherhood to natural motherhood. And in the early part of the 20th century, under the ethos of scientific motherhood, a good mother followed the experts' recommendations and did what the scientists said, and very strict rules, for instance. You didn't pick up a child when it was crying because that would spoil the child. Or you tried to toilet train very early, very rigid meal structures. And then this shifts to this idea of natural motherhood, and which really picks up steam in the 60s and 70s. And this is this idea, trust yourself. You have this innate knowledge about your child and what it needs. And you know better than the experts. And so you can defy them and define authority and taking this matter into your own hands. So that's going on. And then you're getting a pretty forward-thinking, progressive Congress, Senate committee in particular, that's holding hearings on the food industry and other industries that are beginning to privilege the consumer. Up until then, it was always, the companies are making these products and they must be good. And at that point, the focus shifts to the consumer. Well, we need to protect the consumer. And so the baby food companies are forced to come testify in front of the Senate committee, and the public kind of understands these issues and these ideas in a different way.
Also, a theme that you discuss a little bit, and it was clear, I think, also in the images. We're talking about mainstream America, that it's white and middle class. How does baby food contribute to this mainstreaming of a certain model of America and maybe leaving other cultures and other classes on the margin?
Yeah. The advertising, the visuals are all white and middle class. I don't think African Americans appear in advertising until the 70s in African American newspapers, and it's much later than that in mainstream periodicals. And there are differing rates at which groups fed their children baby food or breastfed. And so immigrant groups tended to breastfeed a little bit more. This is in this 20th century period. There's some evidence in the South that the South kind of made their own baby food and didn't use as much jarred baby food. But really, baby food, Gerber baby food, is like Kleenex or Folgers coffee. It's cheap enough that it can be a product that's used across the classes, and it becomes shorthand for baby food. When you hear baby food, it can be anything really, but baby food means Gerber baby food or Beechnut baby food or Heinz. So even though the images are saying one thing, and there is some variation in use across ethnic groups or classes or regions, it is a ubiquitous product across the United States. And in the 1990s, the Gerber baby is the most recognized brand icon of all products. Kodak, McDonald's, IBM, whatever. The Gerber baby is the one that's most recognized. So it really makes its way into the fabric of American food habits.
And I like also the idea of, trying to feed early your babies to get them ready for, some sort of competition. Make them stronger, make them... Yeah. Can you talk more about that? I think it's a very interesting and scary idea of projecting onto an infant.
Yeah.
The idea that they have to be ready for the battle.
Right. Right. I mean, I think one of the reasons why the age of introducing solids dropped so dramatically in that 1950s, 1960s period is that it's all part of this kind of post-war anxiety and kind of race to achievement. It's happening in the space race. You're getting the building of suburbs. It's this incredibly wealthy superpower, and with a sense of its own exceptionalism and power. And there was this real feeling that my baby needs to be smarter, my baby needs to be stronger, and the way that I'm doing that is to feed my baby at earlier ages. Baby food you could see it, it was tangible, it had colors, it just reassured women to feed their baby solid food that felt like it was more nourishing. And the science was not telling them otherwise. I mean, in this period, formula was seen as fine and even superior to breast milk. There was still this idea that, we can do it better than nature. And so those were all the cues that and the pressures that women were feeling. And so doctors would say, the woman comes in with a month-old baby and she's already started to feed it. And then doctors themselves were getting into this act too. So doctors would write books about how to start feeding your baby solids 24 hours after birth. It was just seen as this evidence of American superiority. We can feed our baby solid foods because we're wealthy, we're powerful, we have the technology, and we don't breastfeed our babies like those people in developing countries. And there was clearly this emerging disgust over breastfeeding, this idea that breasts, the sexualization of the breast created this distance between breastfeeding and breasts. And that played into this whole, issue of feeding infants at this time too.
And last question, then we can open it. Where do you think now baby food is going? You talked about the pouches, but are there new trends towards the natural food, like in the 70s? Is there the attempt of, introducing more organic food in baby food? Or there is just maybe the desire to give up baby food and just use those pouches as sort of snacks? But with a different role, let's say, in the weaning of the children.
Well, the story of baby food is in some sense the story of the larger history of American food. And so what happens in the 1990s to 2000s is you start getting this emergence of the good food movement, this idea that we can have an alternative to our highly processed, industrialized food system, that foods that are local are good, foods that are fresher are good. We want to support farmers. We want our food to be environmentally friendly as possible, as well as good for our bodies. And so baby food starts to pick up on those cues, and you have the rise of boutique baby food manufacturers that are only producing organic, that are trying to create different flavors and textures, and they take off and are very popular. And you probably, or some of you are aware of the brands Plum Organics and Happy Baby and Ella's Kitchen, all of which have been bought by larger transnational corporations now because they are seen as so valuable. What was your question? Baby food doesn't go away, and baby food won't go away. These smaller companies have created a larger share of the market, but the big manufacturers, Gerber, Beech-Nut Heinz, have followed those trends as well, and so have their own organic line or special pouches or fancy flavors, and they have largely cleaned up their act so that most of the sugar or the salts are out. There's no more baby food desserts. There used to be a lot of them. And baby food is not going to go away as long as Americans value flexibility and convenience, and women want to perform paid work outside of the home and other elements. However, there is definitely a turn to a certain demographic finding value and satisfaction in making their own baby food. And so there's a certain group that has eschewed commercial baby food and has both found pressure and also pleasure in making one's own baby food. So in a certain demographic today, to be a good mother means to make all of your own baby food by scratch. In the 1950s, to be a good mother was to use formula and feed your baby Gerber baby food 4 to 6 weeks. So the advice and the practice has changed, but this anxiety has maintained. There also is a group that's arguing that we don't need baby food anymore. That baby food is a category that was invented and now has served its useful purpose. And so a movement called baby-led weaning that advocates just breastfeeding entirely until 6 months and then just chopping up table food and sticking it on the high chair, the tray. So we're really in an interesting moment in terms of baby food, I think, too. And maybe some of you read the news a few days ago about studies that are showing that it might be better to prevent peanut allergies to feed babies peanuts earlier rather than later. And this is something that's been coming down the pipeline for a few years. There's the advice and practice for potential allergic foods was to feed them late and to introduce them one at a time, very late, to check for allergies, to be very conservative in the foods that you introduced. But this study, as well as some other studies, are showing, you know what, maybe it's better to feed more foods faster at an earlier age, because what you sacrifice, well, not only is peanuts might have a homeopathic and inoculation effect, but that you're sacrificing palate development if you wait so long to introduce flavors and fruits. Because we know that babies learn through taste, right? Amniotic fluid is flavored. And so an infant in utero is learning about signature flavors and spices that the mother ingests. And so comes out with already some knowledge and continues to learn about the world through taste. And if you delay that and only feed white rice cereal or applesauce, pears, bananas, these common first foods, what you're teaching your child is that food is smooth, bland, white, and sweet. And so you're sacrificing, some people believe, really important, valuable education and developing a broader array, broader development and acclimation to other tastes and flavors.
Is this connected? You mentioned before that there are some baby foods now with kale and quinoa. Mm-hmm. Is that part of that reasoning? So let's expose children to a whole variety of flavor, or is just, these are the cool foods that I eat, so my child should eat them too?
I think it's sort of the latter. I think it's the cool food thing. I think, ultimately baby food makers are selling baby food to the mother, to the parents, and not to the baby. So, a mother who herself is consuming kale would probably be much more likely to pick up a jar of kale than a jar of pureed ham or, something else that's kind of an old school baby food flavor. But there's also value in it. Why not? Why not try to introduce these broad arrays of flavors and tastes in these kinds of food?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the fact one of the tastes you indicated in the 50s, it was bacon.
Yeah.
for young children. You wouldn't think of that as,
No, that was like a popular baby food, canned baby food, bacon and eggs. It's so funny to think about now, I know.
So you really educate your children to, the full-on breakfast
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for Amy?
They are doing exactly those studies. Like if we feed infants these flavors at this age, and then we track them, what are going to be their preferences later on. So I'm very interested in that research. And although I have to preface this all by saying, you know what, you as a parent, you do things very diligently, and then the kid goes off and does what they want to do and taste different. And you can raise two children in exactly the same way, and they'll have totally different taste preferences. And so, I always want to make a caveat that, you do what you think is right, and then you only have so much control. So that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing is, it's hard to really damage a kid, as long as that kid is fed adequately, loved, provides, has a warm home and clothes and, all of that stuff. Kids are very resilient, and they, I was formula fed with Gerber baby food, so I'm okay. And so it's always, these talks I think sometimes create further anxiety. And so some ways the story of baby food Well, yeah, maybe there's better practices, moments where we've learned something along the way. We are extraordinarily lucky in that we've had this adequate food supply. But there are researchers are finding windows where, children are more adventurous in their eating, and then the window where they just clamp down and they're going to be very conservative.
Amy, I was curious. Obviously, large corporations like to market their food, and they were doing a pretty good job in the U.S. Did you examine any of their attempts to market this kind of baby food to other cultures and other nations?
Well, I wish I could have done a huge comparative study. That would have been a lot of fun. I know a little bit about it. In the 1950s, there's a baby boom, which is great for the American companies. So they're doing quite well, but they are always anticipating a decline and always looking for ways to expand market share. So pretty quickly in the 1950s, they start creating baby food plants in the, they were mostly begun in the Northeast and in Michigan. They moved to the South. They moved to California. They're following basically where produce is grown. And then they start creating plants overseas. So I think Mexico, Puerto Rico, a couple in Europe. And then they start proliferating in Europe and crack Asia later. So Gerber and Heinz especially are moving overseas. There are also baby food manufacturers that are developing in Europe in particular, and they have their own brands, and they're very similar.
I can testify, in Italy, for instance, we did have Gerber, but we didn't have Heinz. And then there were local brands like Plasmon, and then Mellin, who I don't know if Mellin is American or German or British. So there were local brands being developed, and right now the big market is China, because due to different scandals connected with systems, Chinese parents are really worried about what they're feeding their children. I mean, there is a formula tourism of Chinese nationals going somewhere and getting back home with formula and other baby foods just to make sure that they're, yes. And so they're allowed to bring in a controlled amount, a certain amount. It's becoming a big issue, especially, also China, India, they start having a large middle class. And so they want to feed the babies in the way they think it's healthier and best for them. I think it's very interesting. It would be interesting to have a comparative study, but that I know of, this is the only one that has been so thorough on the history of baby food.
Gerber also gets entwined in the Nestle formula debacle in the 1970s. So if you know about that, Nestle aggressively advertises its formula in developing countries, basically persuading women to stop breastfeeding and using formula, but the water is not clean, or they may not have enough money to get sufficient formula, and so infant mortality just starts rising. So there's a big Nestle boycott, and eventually there's WHO guidelines, World Health Organization guidelines on advertising and marketing of infant formula, and that also extends to baby food. And one of the guidelines is that you cannot use pictures of infants younger than 6 months on your products, because women who may not be able to read, those are visual cues that you can feed your child, very young baby, those products. The Gerber baby looks about 3 months old. And so the Gerber baby is not allowed on marketing in developing countries. So in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, I think, Gerber goes to Guatemala and wants to create a baby food plant, and the Guatemalan government says, well, that's fine, but you can't put the Gerber baby on the label. That's an incredibly valuable icon, as we discussed, and they basically ignore that and kind of just do what they want. And it's tied up in the politics. The government tries to stop them, but there's no mechanism basically that stops them from using that label. You fast forward to today, to just a couple years ago, Gerber goes to Brazil to set up a baby food manufacturing plant. And I'd have to go back and look at the document, but I believe they don't even try to use the Gerber baby on the label. So it's interesting, in that span of 20, 25 years, something changed, whether it was the larger gestalt or the threat of a lawsuit or the Olympics or the World Cup or something, that they decided that was not a fight they were going to fight, and so they were complying to these WHO guidelines. So pretty interesting.
Well, I kind of have a question and like what your opinion and observation is on today, especially with not necessarily baby food, but in industrialized superfoods and also like shakes and smoothies and things like that, which kind of remind me of baby food in a lot of ways. So they're super hyper nutritious and they're like bright colors, and I just wonder if you think that and they're connected with being like stronger and fitter and all this like time, and what your thoughts are on that, and do you know anything that's...
I don't know if I can be objective about those. Maybe some of you other people can do it. I tend to be pretty skeptical of kind of food trends and food fads, like anything that's going to kind of dramatically alter a sensible diet. I don't know. I mean, like a right? So grains, fruits and vegetables, protein in some form. I think when we try to tinker with that, we're doing that for a reason. And so I see like a liquid diet, and I know they're all not like meal replacements, but when we put so much stock into an item like a smoothie or a super drink, I think it's very emblematic of a larger American impulse to find the quick fix, to find the perfect pill, to find that secret that's going to unlock health. A magic elixir, I guess, is kind of how I see them. And I know, and that's being way too over analytical, because everybody can enjoy, a thing. But I guess that's how I understand them, as kind of this search for the medicine, search for the pill. I don't know if you have any ideas on that, Fabio.
The idea of nutritionism, the fixation on the components of the food and the nutrients rather than food and ingredients as one element. And I think also that's something that maybe has started here, but it's becoming also widespread in most post-industrial society. Probably the idea that, the body is sort of a machine, and the more we understand how this machine works, the more we want to give the right fuels in the right amount. And we forget that food is also, emotional, and it's sensual, and all these elements that are very important. And I just thought of something. Do you think there is a connection between the race of baby food and the existence of kit menus? The fact that here in the US, it's normal to think that children, eat differently than adults. For instance, in Europe, children are educated to eat most of the adults' food pretty early. They sit at the table with the adults. Even in school food, they use forks and knives, and they eat food that adults would eat too.
Come on, Fabio. American kids use sporks. That's pretty cool. You know what you think?
That's true. That's a genius invention.
Spork, yeah. It's also a great word, spork. I think so. The United States is so good at creating products and are so good at advertising them, and it's so good at finding niches to develop or exploit, whatever you want to call it, for better and worse. They're pretty genius at doing that, and so kids' menus, I think, definitely fit into that, and also cater to these taste preferences that are easy: the salt, sugar, fat, and so. If there isn't a direct connection between the baby food makers and the kids' menus, there's definitely an underlying mechanism. There's studies that they conducted in the 2000s. They wanted to see what babies ate, and that baby means 4 months to 12 months, because there hadn't been any serious nutrition studies that were tracking what infants ate. And you can watch in the studies, you can watch infants go from commercial baby food, and once they start getting off commercial baby food at about 9 months, guess what their most commonly consumed vegetable is? French fries. And so actually baby food has a protective factor in that it's providing a wider variety of fruits and vegetables than probably the family itself is eating, because it's, you grab a jar of squash and a jar of mango and this and that, and probably fruits and vegetables that a lot of American families aren't eating. And so that baby is actually getting a wide variety, and that the baby that stays on baby food longer has a greater variety in diet than the baby that goes off it. And you can watch French fries kind of move up into third place, and then by the time they're 2 and 3, it's the most commonly consumed vegetable. So pretty amazing and pretty emblematic of this, highly industrialized diet. That's kind of where we've moved, and we've made some good strides. McDonald's and the others are starting to substitute those and replace soda, and whether they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart or they're feeling pressure to do it, it's all good, right? There was one other thing I wanted to say. About the smoothie. Also, this is personal. I just prefer to chew my food than drink it. I drink, and recently there's been a popular baby food diet for adults, and that some movie stars have gone on, and it's very appealing to college age women. Basically, you have like 16 jars of baby food a day that you can just eat. And then like for one meal a day. And it's portion control. What it is this portion control, right? And baby food is pretty low calorie. You're missing a lot of nutrients like protein and certain vitamins and fiber. And but it acts as portion control in a world where there is so many choices and so much anxiety over food that it feels comfortable to limit it in that way. But if you had an apple or some baby food applesauce, I would kind of rather eat the apple. So anyway, it's interesting.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Congratulations again on the book. It's fantastic. Thank you for coming and talk to us about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all for braving the elements out there. This has been really great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Good evening.